Welcome to the What Now podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Powers. Follow along as I figure out how to go from feeling lost and at a crossroads in my life to hopefully, eventually, being found. If you have ever felt like you needed a change or pivoting from your current experience is necessary, but you just don't know how, join me. Wanderers are always welcome. Hey everyone, welcome back to What Now, a podcast for Lost and Found. This is your host, Amanda. So excited to be here. It's been kind of a crazy busy week. We are almost in wedding week. So things have been picking up in my schedule, not only with work, but personal life. Tomorrow, I am doing the photo shoot for the slight rebrand that we're going to do for the podcast. I'm very excited. We're going to get some new graphics and real branding and just a more cohesive vision that I've had in my head, trying to get that out. So I'm very, very excited. Your girl's going to look far more professional eventually. Not right now. Right now I'm in an Honor Active t-shirt. Not that any of you can see yet, but one day when this is on YouTube, anybody that's watching on YouTube, hello. But let's see. Let me catch you up. So last week we had an episode with the amazing transformation and subconscious guide coach, Ash Sabolka. She is great and based in Charleston, South Carolina, but she provides her therapeutic modalities and retreats all over the country. You can most likely find her, though, in Charleston or New York City. So definitely go back and check out last week's episode and be sure to read all about her and send her any questions you might have. She also does free clarity calls, so you can do a free chat with her to kind of see if you're a good fit or the things that you're going through and dealing with. Maybe they haven't gone as well through therapy or traditional therapeutic paths and you're open to trying something different. You might be a good fit for her. So definitely give her a call and check her out. She was so nice and so lovely to talk to. I had a really great time chatting with her, and I could feel myself, even though I wasn't going through the therapeutic moments with her, or we weren't doing a session live on the podcast, but she seemed extremely approachable and loving and honestly humble, right? Humbled to the situation and the life experience that she had had and how she knew she didn't want that to reoccur for others. And she was going to do everything she could to help people live a better life or live the life that they were meant to have, full of joy and excitement and meaning. And so I think that that's a really great calling to have and a huge resource for the listeners here, because that's really the whole point of my show, is to acknowledge feeling like you're in a horrible transition period or a really rough, frustrating time in your life, be that with your career, your relationships, your family, your own personal health and mental well-being, and not really knowing where to turn. And it was great to have her on the show to give an alternative perspective, right? For the people in our lives or for ourselves, if we feel like we've tried everything we can think of, every version of self-help, every journal, every podcast, every personal session, every psychologist, every medication that you could think of, if you've tried it all and nothing's worked and nothing makes you feel better, then what's the harm in chatting with somebody like Ash, right? So after chatting with Ash, I went straight to DC to visit some friends, which was wonderful and hot, and oh my gosh, it was a hot swamp up there, and I don't miss that part at all. No way. But I was there for a few days and teleworking, and then I did go up to Philly and late on one of the days and got my hair done. Again, you can't see because I'm not on the YouTubes yet, but we trimmed a bit more than I had expected, so it's a bit shorter than I had originally thought in my head that it would look like. But Bobby Mack is my hairstylist that I used to see in Philadelphia when I lived there, and he's just incredibly talented. You get what you pay for. Let me say that. It's not a cheap haircut kind of salon. It's not a quick in and out. When I first moved to Philly, it took, I think, 3 months for me to get into his salon because the wait list was so long. They could only fit me in with the owner. So I was kind of like, well, I'm desperate. I need my hair done. So let me go get this. And I never looked back. And even though I've moved over 2 years ago, when I have an excuse to go back to the East Coast, I make an excuse to go say hi to him and get my hair touched up and stuff. But this time I decided that July 2024 is a month of transition for me. It's a very pivotal time right now. So first, I decided to no longer be a redhead. Most of my hair had grown out anyway, and I had not been upkeeping with the way that redheads work. It fades much more quickly if you're not a natural redhead, and so I'm not, of course. And my roots had all grown out, and the vibrancy had all faded away. And I decided, you're about to do a photo shoot for the podcast. You have to close out the redhead chapter. Not that the redhead Amanda wasn't beautiful or pretty, or attractive or sustainable or whatever, but it is a whole lot more maintenance. And I went deep into the redhead identity when I was living in Philadelphia, and the Philadelphia chapter has closed. And there was a part of me, this may not make sense to anybody listening or to most people if you don't get your hair done that often, but there was a part of me that knew if I kept the red hair up, I was still keeping that door open, metaphorically, right? Like nobody was tempting me to come back. Nobody was trying to recruit me to do the work again. Literally no one has asked me back, which is completely fine. When I actively chose to leave, I chose to become a new Amanda. And I saw this quote the other day on social media, and I'm going to butcher it because I didn't save it, but it was something along the lines of, your new life will cost you your old one. And if I am trying to build a new life here in Nashville, and I'm trying to create a new path for myself with this podcast and with these kind of creative outlets, if I want this new life, it's going to cost me my old one. And so it'll cost me redheaded Amanda, metaphorically, right? Like, obviously I'm still the same person. I just have different hair now, but like, redheaded Amanda chapter is finished. I have to give her up to pay for my future, if that makes any sense at all. And so that was one of the reasons for the trip as well, was I want to go up there, make sure I get this appointment done. And that way my hair is done and finished and ready to go for the photo shoot for the podcast, because that's the other transition. So I closed out redhead chapter early July. Mid-July, I am doing the photo shoot for the podcast. So we are doing the slight rebrand. We're getting brand new headshots, which I haven't done, honestly, probably since I think the last family photo shoots we ever did, I was either a sophomore or a junior in college, and my brother was sophomore or junior in high school. Because that was the last like family portrait we have that's hanging in my parents' house, and I'm looking back in my head. Like, you can't see me staring up in my skull right now, but so it's been a very, very long time since I've taken legitimate photos, and so I need those for the podcast. I need those for being able to pitch myself to other guests and to look like a little bit more of a legitimate situation. And plus, it's just kind of fun, right? Anybody that follows me on social, I have kind of a cluster rainbow spattering of imagery all over my social media. So I have no consistent anything, really. I use different filters. I use different colors. I do black and whites. I do vacation photos. I do whatever. It's just my life. That's kind of like if a rainbow threw up and like was on my page, that's kind of what I feel like it looks like. And like for my personal page, I don't care. But like, it's always so much more fun when you can get a legitimate photographer to take photos of you, because I feel like you see sides of yourself that you didn't realize were there, because they're able to capture. I think a really good photographer is going to be able to capture a moment or a thought or a feeling in just one image. And so I'm super excited to see what she can come up with, because it'll probably be an emotional photo shoot, but in the best way possible, because it's me betting on myself. It's me investing in something that I've never invested in before. It's me showing the world who I am now. And it's just a very exciting thing. It's a very, very exciting thing. Whew, I'm tearing up. Don't do it. Don't cry. I'm so excited. I'm so excited. So that's happening. And then at the end of the month, the third reason why July is such a transition period right now is my brother's getting married. And so they're getting married on Monday. July 29th. And so it's 10, I guess technically 10 days away right now as we're recording. That's huge, right? Like my brother's no longer, like he'll always be my little brother, but he's not just my brother now. Now he's a husband. Now he's seriously an adult. Like this is for real, for real. No, no take backs. Like this is it. This is happening. This is nerve-wracking and cool, and a chapter for him that's closing and a new one that's opening too. And there's so many emotions floating around. There's so much joy floating around. There's so much to be grateful for in this transition period of a month. And I don't want to disregard that. And I don't want to be, I guess, ignorant of all of the things and the feelings. And I don't want to subdue anything, right? So this week's episode is mostly just to kind of give you guys a brush up on what's going on and, the type of content you're about to see and get from me for the next few weeks. It'll mostly be around like my family and my personal transition periods and stuff and everything that's been happening to me. And so I'm just so excited. And plus my mom's coming in this weekend because we're still doing wedding shopping stuff. Got to get shoes and accessories and make sure that we coordinate and everything looks good together, and that'll be fun. So that'll be some nice one-on-one time before the wedding. Just so much. And y'all, I know that not every episode of this podcast is going to be like, ooh, amazing. Like, wow, so insightful. But literally sometimes I come on the show and I have notes. I'm looking at them on my phone right now, but I have notes of the things that I think I want to say. And sometimes what comes out of my mouth is deeper or more significant than I thought it would be. So I appreciate you and I'm very grateful for your patience as this living diary essentially is just opened up and poured into over and over and over again. Because sometimes when I'm explaining my feelings, I'm also reckoning with them at the same time as I'm talking out loud. So, it hits you. It hits you differently when you speak out loud sometimes. But let's get down to business. The main thing I wanted to talk about today were some notes that I took while I was in DC. I had a break during some of my meetings, and one of the breaks I decided to take a walk on the mall. And the National Mall in DC, if you haven't been, is this massive green space. I'm not going to try and give it a size because I don't know, but it's this massive green space. It'll feel similar to like just a giant green strip like Central Park is, but smaller than Central Park in New York. And all of the Smithsonians and museums and various some government agencies and government buildings face the mall. And so when you're walking up and down the mall, you can look at all the different war memorials and presidential memorials and just kind of take in American history. And the vast majority of the museums that are on the mall as well are also free. So you can learn a lot and pop in and out. And because the mall has a lot of green space, people go up there for graduations, weddings, the running clubs, adult like sports leagues, whatever. And so it's a very fitness, walking oriented education type space. And one of my favorite things when I used to live there was to go for runs on the mall. And I'd start out closer to the Capitol and run down to Lincoln, go from Lincoln over to what is now Martin Luther King Memorial, and then Martin Luther King over to Thomas Jefferson. And I would relax at Thomas Jefferson because that one was my favorite out of all of them. And I decided that I don't get to come up to DC very often anymore, and I need to go for a walk on the mall, which is a heinous idea because it was, again, swelteringly hot. But I knew it would bring me joy, or at least it would make me feel happy to be reconnected to a space that I once loved. And I decided to go on the walk. But while I was walking, I had this intense need to take notes. And so I just started to write down my thoughts as I was walking along the mall, trying to just let it like flow through me. I wasn't trying to rationalize what I was thinking. I was just writing down the thought as it came up. So some of these may seem kind of out of order, but they are all points that I wanted to come up with and talk to you about because the overall theme of this episode is talking about living with regrets and facing moments in your life where you're trying to decide, should I regret that or not? Do I regret that or not? And do I feel bad if I decide not to regret it? Do I feel bad if I decide I do regret it and there's nothing I can do about it? So I was reflecting a lot on regrets as I was walking around the mall. But so this first note is just that, like, I told myself this week that it was great to see my friends, even if I can only see a handful of them while I was there. Everybody's very busy, and it was hard because there was also a NATO conference going on at the exact same time. So a lot of my friends that are government employees did not have to go into the office, so they did not commute, and it would have been difficult to see them. So I didn't get to see as many people as I would have liked. But the main thing was that I mostly just kept the back of my mind that kept coming up anytime I'd run into somebody. It just was kind of like a pang of nostalgia where it felt like I was seeing an ex that you don't hate, but you can't go back to them. You can't fix it. All the differences and irreconcilable differences that you two may have had, too much time has passed between the two of you where it wasn't really a dumpster fire train crash of a breakup, but it also wasn't a nice breakup either. So it's kind of like neutral. Like if you've ever run into an ex in real life, but it was an ex where you think of them fondly now because enough time has passed where you can have a objective perspective on what went down when you were younger and you two were different people and you've grown. Clearly, the two of you running into each other now in the future, in current state, you are two very different people and you can pick up on that vibe. But there's also that other vibe where you're just like, what could have been, but you're not willing to try and see what could have been because you know better than that, right? So it's kind of like, that was the feeling I kept having everywhere I went, even when I was in Georgetown, where I used to go to school, and visiting with a friend that was over there, and on the mall, which used to be a solace for me. It was one of my favorite things in the world to do, was run on the mall. And while I was on the mall, that's where it hit the hardest, was that feeling of nostalgia, the like running into someone and you're kind of like, oh, hi, what are you doing here? So weird, it felt like too much time had passed. We were two different, me and DC, we were two different people now. So it was very weird. And I would talk to my friends a little bit about this, but of the ones I was able to see, they, of course they would tell me they miss me and they'd want me to move back. And they were hoping that I would be able to find a way to make it work, even with Dirks. And quite honestly, I do miss my friends. I do miss my old life there. It was a good life. I had fun. I enjoyed it. It was expensive and chaotic and a rush and mind-boggling and soul-sucking and so formative for who I became as a person. But I'm not ready for a move, really. When I really like get down to the brass tacks here, my access to my family in Nashville, the space that I'm able to rent in Nashville, the backyard I'm able to have for Dirks, like financially with interest rates and with a large dog and like all that kind of stuff, like I have a better situation here. It'll be extremely difficult to replicate location and space and finances in DC without either taking a different job or moving near DC, but not actually in DC proper. So I'd have to be in either like Maryland or Virginia, and I'd have to commute in, and trying to get property there right now with the interest rates would be insane. So it's just not, I don't know how I would actually make it work financially. It would have to be a significant opportunity for me to even consider it. And then the next thought I jotted down was, would it be a step backwards? And I don't know, right? It probably felt that way while I was walking on the mall. Like, you left Philly for a reason because you wanted to move forward and you weren't getting the opportunity to really progress yourself in Philadelphia. And I still stick by this, but like my rationale for not accepting a job in DC to transfer to was that moving back to DC didn't solve the problem. DC was still expensive, even early after COVID was over, or not over, but after restrictions had been lifted. So in 2022, DC was still expensive. I wouldn't have been able to get Dirks, and we knew that puppies were coming. I would have still been minimum driving 6.5 hours from my family. So that was still not necessarily easier to do. I didn't have a car, so I was going to have to buy a car. It was a lot. And so now that I'm in Nashville and I've established myself here, going back to DC, I don't think it would really depend on the job. I don't think emotionally it would necessarily be a step backwards, but without pursuing the actual right opportunity for me and for my goals, I think it could be. So it's not necessarily a step back as a city. Like, I love being there. I want to visit. I would like to be there more often if I can figure out a way to make that happen with my current job. But I do not see DC propelling me forward with my current goals for my creativity or the podcast necessarily. Moving there doesn't, without the right opportunity, moving there doesn't seem to make sense. So maybe not necessarily a step backwards, but it's definitely not a step forward either. And so I started to think to myself, okay, well, if it's not a step backwards, maybe I should just appreciate the fact that cities don't just disappear. There's always flights available. There are really good positive things happening at my current job, and my current job does provide services to the federal government. So it's entirely possible that as long as these current opportunities still come to fruition for my current company, there's potential for more DC travel. So it's not like it's going anywhere, right? So if I need to continue working on establishing myself elsewhere, DC will be waiting. It's not, if it didn't disappear in 2019 when I left, it's not going to disappear later. So for now, I don't have to look at it as kind of like a lost cause. So after I thought through, the city disappearing option and scenario, I started to write down, I am reconciling the feeling the same energy and purpose in DC that I always felt. But now I am different. And so the metaphorical clothes just don't fit right. Let me see if I can explain. Being in DC is because it's a very specific city. It's as the capital of the United States. It contains history, but it's also living history. So the way I've explained it sometimes to other people before is that you're waking up every day. If you live there, you're waking up every single day and contributing to history. Active history book writing. Our laws are being made and passed there. Our lives are being changed as just regular citizens every single day there. The decisions and policies and leaders that operate there are affecting your lives on a day-to-day basis. And you have people from all over the world, so it's a very international and semi-transient city where there's multiple cultures, multiple languages being spoken, all kinds of different ethnic food, different celebrations, different embassies and stuff are there. So you have an immense amount of different perspectives and thoughts and religions and exposure to other parts of the world despite still being in America. So it's a very specific, vibrant feeling. And if you are drawn to that, like I have been and probably always will be, that energy fulfills you with purpose. If you're living there, you feed off of that whether you realize it or not. There are people there trying to pursue very specific purposes. There's multiple handfuls of think tanks and stuff there doing research and trying to drive decision making within the government. And so it's a very specific push and pull that you cannot quite understand unless you've either worked there or lived there before. But when I was walking around on the mall, I could feel that energy and I could see it around me, or see the history being made around me. Like, that part has never changed about that city, and I hope it never does. But I felt weird being there. I felt out of place. I felt like not necessarily an imposter, but maybe it is like when you've outgrown something. Like, I had a growth spurt over the last few years, or since 2019, since I left it. And now when I try to put on the DC suit or the DC persona that I would have had back then, it didn't fit. It didn't feel, it wasn't clicking, if that makes any sense. And so then I started to think about, all right, well, if I'm trying to, am I forcing it? Is this me dealing with a regret? Do I regret being here? Do I regret leaving it too soon? Do I regret picking Nashville over DC? And is that really what I'm feeling? Is it not this metaphorical, like, suit, or the metaphorical running into an ex that you don't want to run into and didn't expect to? And is it actually regrets? And I wrote down, it's not a regret. It's just that change is uncomfortable. And this week was a big fat reminder that I'm still in transition. And so, of the friends that I was able to see, they were kind of catching me up on what's been happening in their lives and what they've been working on and what they're dealing with now with the current state of affairs with the government. And they all seem to be progressing and moving forward. Some of them bought their own apartments. Some of them are getting married. Some of them they got promotions and got a job that they had been gunning for a while. And I am, I don't even want to say it out loud. I was, for lack of a better word, I quit. I quit it. I quit the grind. I decided not to be a part of it anymore. Really, they couldn't talk to me. There was a certain amount of things they could say and a certain amount that they could not, which is, of course, what they should be doing with their jobs. They have to protect what they work on, and that's part of their contracts. But I was an outsider. I was the one that quit. I was the one that left. I was the one that moved on to an industry that's not relatable to anything that they're talking about anymore. And I'm also the one that started a podcast to speak out into the universe about how I don't know what I'm doing with my life, and I don't know where I'm going, and I don't know what's going to happen. And I'm trying so hard to be happy and confident with the decisions that I've made for myself. And sometimes I'm super proud of it, and other times I'm like, what are you doing? How could you possibly think that this is a realistic path? How could you possibly think that any of this is going to turn out or amount to something? Which is sad, but a natural way to think. Like, it's not an unexpected way to think. Like, humans are always going to be self-doubting themselves. And it just was still, by being there and visiting my friends and going to places I used to love and trying to do the things I used to enjoy there, it just reminded me even more that I'm still in transition. And like, you would think that May 2022 was far away from here at this point in July of 2024, but it's really not. A little over 2 years ago, and it's really not. Growth, significant, life-changing growth, doesn't happen overnight. Huge success, like other people that have started shows, doesn't happen overnight. That's just not a thing. People that start their businesses, my dad's business, he started that in 1997. So they'll be hitting I can't do math, don't ask me. They'll be hitting a significant milestone soon, in the next few years. It'll be almost 30 years that he's had his business. 27 years this year, I guess. And I'm still in transition. Spending that week in DC just reminded me that I'm still in transition, and that's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to admit to your friends that you don't know what you're doing. It's uncomfortable to admit to them that you worry about your finances, that you worry about building a future for yourself, that you worry about how you're going to make your dreams come true if you can't see the path forward. I have a vision, but when you still feel lost, you don't know what to say sometimes, right? You want to be confident, you want to be happy, you want to be secure with decisions that you've made, and you don't want to show people that you don't have it figured out, even though the truth is everybody and nobody has it figured out. So it was hard. It was an uncomfortable few days for me. Like, I had fun with my friends. They were great. They did not say anything mean or hurtful or demeaning or anything like that. I received nothing but support while I was there. Nothing but happiness and positivity towards me. So I don't want anybody to think that, like, I don't want to go back to DC because I don't like my friends. Meh. And it's like, no, I was having an internal conversation with myself about how uncomfortable it still feels to be in transition, and accepting that I'm going to live in this uncomfortable time needs to happen. I need to accept that, and accepting it will not make it go away, but it should make it easier. And when I was walking around those monuments and the memorials, like, it reminded me that, like, if you still feel this strongly towards DC, and being in DC still bubbles up all of these emotions, like, and how I feel about the city and the vibe and what's happening in it and the people around me, it shows me that, like, my values personally have not changed. What I care for and what I'm passionate about is still there. But my execution of my mission has changed. And there's nothing wrong with that, as long as my values stay true and I stay true to who I am and what I care about. That cannot waver, because as soon as I do that, then I've lost myself again. As soon as I do that, then I'm not authentic anymore. As soon as I do that, I'll never reach my goals. I can't just let that go. The path I'm on is different, but the mission is still the same. My values are still the same. How I choose to execute my purpose has changed. That's all. And I don't regret changing the path at all. I don't regret changing the path. But it became very clear that it's really uncomfortable to transition your life. It's really uncomfortable to take a risk like that on yourself. And the things I need to hold on to should be the loving and happy and good memories there. So when I go back, I can appreciate the place for what it is and what it gave me, but I shouldn't regret walking away from it. And hopefully the metaphorical city doesn't regret making me go either. So the last final thoughts I wrote in here on my notes while I was on the mall, I didn't actually make it to the Thomas Jefferson Memorial, and that one's my favorite. And if I had walked all the way over there, it probably would have been one of the harder ones for me to look at. I think it would have brought up a lot of emotions, especially this month. I've admired that one for my whole life, and I used to have this kind of silly dream that if I was ever going to get proposed to, because I love being on the mall, and I used to run it at night sometimes too, because as the sunset's going down, it kind of like shifts and goes from being all bright white and pearly, marbly everywhere, to kind of subdued and darker tones, and it's just really pretty, the backdrop of the city on the skyline and stuff. So I used to like running at night, and I would always end the run at the Thomas Jefferson Memorial because it was lit up inside. It'd be very bright, and you could read the inscriptions and stuff from his time and look at the mall and watch the mall just kind of light up slowly, with just the regular twinkling lights of all the buildings and streets and stuff as the city faded away and from the sunset. And silly me used to have this dream idea in my head that would be what I would do with my partner. We would run the mall or have an excuse to walk the mall at night or something, and we would end up at the Thomas Jefferson Memorial. There'd be like candles and stuff lit up everywhere, and then they would propose there because they would know that that was one of the most significant places of my life where I've changed the most. One of the founding fathers that has influenced a lot of my thoughts and perspectives, for better or for worse. Nobody's perfect, especially Thomas Jefferson. But it's just kind of where I began my love of history and love of DC was at that memorial. And my father used to take me there a lot too, and that was significant to me. So I thought, way younger me used to think, oh, well, when it happens, it'll happen there. But during this DC trip, I kind of psyched myself out of it and decided, no, you're not going to walk over there. You're not going to do that. Because now, with all the things that have happened in my life and the kind of changes that are happening now, the transition that I'm in, that dream proposal seems even further away than before. Either purposefully, because one, I just don't physically live there, and two, because I'm not with I don't have a significant relationship like that. But I don't also focus on marriage and romance the same way anymore that I used to. And maybe that's my fault. Maybe that's my fault for giving up my time lately to people who have never deserved it and shouldn't have been granted, multiple chances for access to me, when the truth was they were never going to follow through on it. And so maybe that's made me a bit more jaded, or at least less and less concerned with that proposal, because that dream proposal gets more and more faded away as more time passes. So that was kind of hard to kind of reconcile with while I was there too. It's like, oh yeah, I remember I used to dream about that or think about that, and now I haven't thought about that in years. So I don't know if that'll ever actually be the moment. It may not happen. So that was another thing I kind of thought about this past week when I was there. I was kind of like, I guess I might have to let go of that as well. And I don't really know how to feel about that beyond what I've shared now, but I think I should have been spending more time on myself. So like while I was out there walking the mall, thinking about who Amanda was back then, I should have been spending more time on myself instead of pursuing people while I lived there that probably did not deserve the time that I was spending on them. And I guess that the comforting thing about being in DC at that moment was the realization that if I was going to regret anything about my time there, the only thing I would really regret was not spending more time on myself. Not spending more time pursuing what was good for me, what was right for me, because what is meant for me will be here eventually. If a door closes, it means I need to make space for another opportunity. If a relationship ends, it means I need to make space for what is going to show me value and worth and become something important in my life. You can't just make space for what's meant for you if you are using up all that space for what you're settling on. So even if what I'm doing now feels very haphazard and transitional and frustrating, I think this is me trying to show myself I'm worth spending time on. I'm worth getting better. I'm worth forcing myself to grow, forcing myself to feel uncomfortable, forcing myself to be a better person, even if that means walking the path alone. Okay, so be it. 2 years ago, I finally decided to choose myself over anything else, and I can't stop now, and neither should you. If you have a dream or a desire or a deep knowing, or you're trying to listen to your intuition, and your intuitive thoughts are telling you that you deserve to take a risk on yourself. You deserve to be happy. You deserve to become, as Ash Sabolka said, you deserve to come fully alive and give yourself permission to do so. Don't stop now. Keep going. I think the only thing you should regret is not doing it sooner. You can't erase the mistakes you've made. You can only learn from them. So I really think the only regret I have right now is not leaving DC, but not believing in myself sooner, not giving myself the time that I deserved when other people weren't going to give it, not walking away from doors that were clearly shut when I should have been looking for the other opportunities that were actually meant for me. That's what I regret. Not any moment that made me who I am. DC Amanda served her purpose. Philadelphia Amanda served her purpose. I need to give Nashville Amanda a chance to serve her purpose, even if I don't understand her right now. She needs to serve her purpose too. So that's all I've got for you for this week. I hope all of you enjoy what's left of your July and you have, fun and don't sit around regretting things that you've been wanting to try or did try and it didn't work, and just keep pushing yourself. Keep drudging through the uncomfortable. What is the other silly phrase that people are saying now a lot on social? You can't go over it or under it. The only way to deal with it is to go through it. Whatever the problem is, go through it. You can't fix it. You can't change it. You can't go over it. You can't go under it. Just go through it. I'm right here with you. I'm going through it now. I am definitely going through it. Probably will for quite a while. So if you're a wanderer like me, hop on, join the journey. You're always welcome here. But that's it. So you know the drill. Like, subscribe, leave a review, share the episode or the show with your friends. I'm always here for your feedback. I would love, more 5-star ratings, leave comments. I think you can do it all via Apple. You can leave 5 stars on Spotify, and you can leave direct comments on the Spotify episodes. But comments about the show itself and ratings about the show itself, you can definitely do through Apple. But please feel free to reach out to me at askwhatnowpodcast@gmail.com. I'm always available for your feedback and suggestions for guests or topics you'd like us to cover. If you have any questions that I could cover on the show as well, we're happy to do that too. I always love hearing from the listeners and hearing from the Wanderlust team, Wanderlust tribe. I am extremely grateful that you're here, and if you've listened all the way to this point, thank you, thank you, thank you. Please like, share, subscribe, leave a review, send it to your friends, your brothers, cousins, uncles, aunties, friends, sisters, husbands, wives, anybody that you think could benefit from the show or benefit from listening to this journey and just kind of wants to have somebody by their side that knows what they're going through, feels what they're feeling. I'm there. Happy to be there. So always reach out. All my contact info will be in the show notes. You've got me at Podcast for the Lost on TikTok and Instagram, and amanda.k.powers on Instagram. So until next time, wanderers are always welcome.